So, how do you go from being a local band to starting touring? This is a question I get asked all the time in consulting calls. And the real key is to start regionally, right? It's to start by going, okay, what are the population centers within 250 miles of me that have venues that have other artists where I can go play? And that's really your jumping off point in a lot of these cases is building from there. And now look, that might involve playing some smaller towns when you're trying to get out initially, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because those smaller towns are really underserved markets, right? Which means they're not like New York City or Berlin or whatever that get dozens of shows in a given genre every single week, right? Instead, they're places where you could be the only indie rock show in that town that week. So showing up and playing is actually going to go better than you think, and more people will buy merch than you think, and a lot of cool stuff can start to pan out. And once you've identified your list of towns, which should be ideally like 10 to 12, you want to start asking, okay, who do we know who has played in these towns? What artists in your local community have already been there? And then you want to hit them up and be like, yo, who did you work with on these shows that you played in these other towns that I saw you played? And beyond that, what you're going to do is you're going to start doing some research into similar artists in each of the towns you're looking at. And I guarantee you, if you are in the global north, there are other artists who probably sound like you or you would fit on a bill with. And you just have to spend some time on Google, maybe spend some time on Reddit. You can even ask in Reddit, what are other artists in this genre in my region and see what people say, right? Doing that homework is really important. This is actually one of the better uses of ChatGPT. We built an insane prompt with my company to help people figure out like, oh, what are the local artists near you? You can do the same thing. And guess what? That's going to start to help open a few doors here and there to get you understanding, okay, here's the list of towns I want to play. Here's the list of places I want to play at. Here's the list of people to work with. And again, working with smaller artists in and around those towns is probably one of the better ways to start opening doors, because hitting up random promoters, unless you have an intro from someone who's like, yo, this person is legit, it's hard to do. It's not really going to work in your favor. The same with hitting up random venues, but we are going to talk about that momentarily. And what you want to say when you're reaching out to artists to maybe do a show together is tell them how great you think they are, check out their music, say something specific, give them a compliment, but also offer to bring them to your town, right? Because a lot of people are trying to figure out how to get to another place. So you need to be able to help bring people to your spot. That's just kind of the baseline rule of how this works, right? With promoters, you just want to be a good communicator and someone who's not asking for a crazy amount of money. If it's your first time in a place and you don't have a big name, yeah, you can ask for $200. You can ask for $250. People might say no. Just be ready for that. They might say you're taking a door deal, which means essentially you're paid a percentage of the tickets that were sold for that show. Take that as you will. But from there, you talk to them, you get a night figured out, and you might have to help them find other acts to put on that bill. Because look, most promoters are kind of bad at their job. Most of them are pretty lazy and don't want to find other locals. That's going to be on you, maybe. Be ready for that. Now, when it comes to hitting up venues directly, because you haven't been able to find a promoter or whatever, obviously start with smaller club venues, start with venues that seem to have local music on them. And when you hit them up, you want to ask for a hold. You are not asking, can I have February 19th? You're asking for a hold. And essentially what happens is a bunch of people probably want to book this venue on February 19th. And so there's a hold system in place, which essentially means you are reserving a spot on the list. So like if you are third hold, that means there's two other people ahead of you also trying to put together nights at that venue on February 19th in this example. So what you need to do is get the hold. Then you need to find local acts to get your lineup together. And then you go back to the venue and you say, hey, I have this list. I have these artists ready to go for February 19th. Can we lock in the date? And then the people who are ahead of you on the holds list will have 24 hours to either get their show together or give up their hold, at which point the night is yours. So take advantage of that. And also realize sometimes you might be told, yo, you're fifth hold on this venue. And that really sucks. But, and this is important, uh, a lot of times, like bigger agencies will book a week of holds at a venue because they're not sure when the artist is actually going to be in that town. So never be afraid to challenge holds, even if you're far behind. And at that point, you're going to have to end up being your promoter on the night. And so you're going to want to talk to the venue about, like, what are your venue costs? Do I have to pay for the door guy, or is that covered by the bar? Do I have to pay for security? Whatever. And at that point, you're just acting as the promoter, just in a different town. And people do this all the time. It's pretty typical, but also that means you get to keep everything that comes in the door after venue costs, although you should probably give a little money to the local bands. But in my experience, generally, if you take that initiative and you start like leading by example and you get the venue, at least one person in one of the local bands will be like, oh, this person's really trying to do it. Let me help them out. And this is really where the community building thing matters, and being friends with people and being nice and talking to people consistently starts to come in, because that's when you start to get people who are actually going to not just show up and complain the whole time, but actually help you make something cool. And finally, what you really want to be doing is at the show, start working on booking the next time you come to that venue, right? Like, it's going to take going to most of these places 2 or 3 times to build up a meaningful fan base there. So what you want to do is, the show went great, you made some friends, whatever. At that moment, ask people, yo, can we come back here in 4 months? Can we do this again? Because you need to keep that forward momentum going. And the reason you start regionally is you want to start with cities that you can play again and again and again and again and again. And if you don't have that, then you're wasting a lot of time, right? There's no point in playing a city that you can't get back to within 6 months. You know, no one's going to remember if you were gone for 3 years. You know, they will have seen a lot of other shows, especially the type of people who are going to small club shows are going to a lot of concerts in general. So you need to be able to cut through their imaginations by showing up consistently. And look, to start, this is going to be really hard as you try to build up the relationships and start getting to places more consistently and figuring out who's going to work with you and who's going to be helpful and who's going to be cool, right? But ultimately, it gets a lot easier as you go. And what I would really focus on doing if I were you is to start with like 2 out of town shows, 1 out of town show, even, just to get out. And then you play that other city again 4 months later. And you just focus on making a lot of connections within your scene and your community, so that, you know, very quickly we can be like, oh, okay, now the next town over is accessible to us because we played with an artist from that town and now we're friends, right? But it's about really understanding and having that list of, okay, here's the core group of cities we're starting in that we want to build from. Let's make friends in those places as much as possible, because otherwise you're really just screwing yourself over. You know what I mean? Like, it really is about just personal connections. And the thing is, after you start doing this consistently and you start showing you're serious, the bigger local players are going to start taking you more seriously and start giving you shots just because they see, like, oh, this person tries really hard. And B, you're going to start looking bigger than you are. And so you're going to start getting more hometown love and more haters. But by showing that ambition, more people connect. And the more that you get people to connect, more good things happen. Thank you so much for watching. This YouTube stuff is still very new for me, but, you know, subscribe for more and email Matt at dropoutmedia.net for private consultation.